with all the faces that I see here, and I think the others who are going to join, that all of us are really invested in seeing how we can make our courts work better for all of us and for all the people in this country. And I think we are all familiar with the symptoms of this problem. The process can seem disempowering, highly unpredictable, and takes too long. And I think there's a pursuit between all of us to find the real systemic problems that are affecting how the courts work. And if we need to have any real chance at improving how it works, I think it's really important we understand the problem well. And then, of course, there can be a whole discussion of what is the right solution to solve this problem. And that's how I found both Prashant's and Chitrakshi's book, Tareekh Pe Justice. For those of you who haven't read it, this is what it looks like. It's great, available on Amazon. And I think reading it, I think even as a person who has been dabbling in this space and trying to understand it, I found many areas that they shed light on extremely interesting and revealing, at least unknown to me before. And that's why we thought it's a great opportunity we reached out to them and said it would be wonderful for us to have this conversation with a wider group. So we unpack some of the insights that they've had. I know some of you in this group have read the book, but for those of you who haven't, I'll just give a high-level synopsis of what the book covers. It's going to be very hard to kind of actually talk about what it does, but it's divided into three broad parts. The first part unpacks a lot about how judges are appointed, transferred, and removed. And they talk about the focus is a lot on the district court and understanding how the district court judiciary can improve. So in this context, particularly, they unpack why a lot of these processes stem from colonial times, and they argue for very concrete changes that can be made on each of these dimensions to improve how the judiciary functions. The second part of the book, they focus a lot on improving the court administration, which is the real engine driving the courts. The team of people, the registry, all the back office staff that works. And they talk about why we need to improve the data and its accessibility, whether it's around budgets or court, just judicial statistics. And I think one of the really interesting parts around it is where they talk about using judicial time as a key metric for how judges in India how we should look at what capacity and to determine how many judges are needed in the country. And they talk about also needing a specialized agency that can manage these administrative affairs. And the last part of their book, they focus a lot on, or they're calling the long-term reform, but in my mind, a lot of this is long-term reform. But they talk about improving the procedural laws, the Civil Procedure Code, the Evidence Act, all of these procedural laws that affect how court processes work. Make some very interesting arguments to bring back the jury system, to improve civic participation in judicial processes, and lastly, a whole overhaul of what the judicial structure to have a union and state judiciary. So I'm just laying out the entire canvas of things, because if some of these ideas are familiar to some of you, we'll open up towards the second half of the call for a discussion around all of this. I thought the way we do the call today is we have an hour. I just spend maybe setting the context with them for about 15, 20 minutes. But what we'd really love is for all of you to come in with your questions after to explore other areas of the book that we wouldn't be able to. So Chitrakshi and Prashant, welcome again, and thanks for taking your time. I thought before we jump into the core content of your book, it would be wonderful to hear from you on what your hypothesis was as you were starting this book. Because some areas of what you cover are what maybe, are arguments we have heard before, like in the need to improve judicial administration and so on. But other parts of your book, which is around how courts, judges are appointed, etc., fairly at least new in the academic research context. And I just would love for you to share a little bit on how you arrived at the chapters that you did. If you can share, was that already a hypothesis you had, or if there were areas that you had to drop along the way that you had, and then your research process revealed they weren't holding good anymore. So it would be great to start from there.
Chitrakshi, why don't you start?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. So there were a lot of things that we discovered during the course of our research that we thought should be spotlighted more than others. And that is obviously the part one on our book, which focuses on judges and their service conditions, and especially their disciplinary processes. And given the fact that nothing had been written out these processes, we found a lot of material through reading case laws when these judges were challenging their removals or suspensions in the high courts. That's how we found material to figure out that this was clearly a problem that was fairly endemic to all states almost. And we found examples from all the states where judges were challenging their suspensions or their dismissals, or the compulsorily retired judges were challenging their orders of compulsory retirement. And that's when we realized this is really something that should be written about more, given that there was no conversation in the debate on judicial reforms, on the service conditions and the insecurity that these judges feel, and how they are administered by the high court. So we chose, this should have been, initially we thought that this would perhaps be a chapter, but given the material that we discovered through case laws, we decided to dedicate more written space to it.
Thank you. Prashant, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add, and before I start, I think my internet connection is acting up. So if that's the case, just let me know. Maybe I'll switch off the video or something, or try to change connections. Yeah, so I think the really new, our major contribution is the first 4 chapters, where I think we have broken some new ground, especially on this entire process of disciplinary mechanisms, the way they function, the way judges are being fired without disciplinary inquiries in the context of compulsory retirement, probation. And these are generally issues that nobody looks at, people working in the field of judicial administration. Even when we were working around 5 years ago at the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, we didn't look at these issues. The general focus is to look at how things are working, in the cases of like statistics, how summons are served. Like these are the issues that are generally the focus, the administrative thing. But I think what our hypothesis and what we've discovered also is the fact that if judges are not secure in their jobs, that is a serious cause of concern, even for judicial efficiency. And they will end up trying to delay or evade cases which either they don't want to hear because they're too complex, or they are scared of hearing because of the way the disciplinary mechanisms work. So I think that is our main focus. When we started the book, the idea was basically to take the conversation beyond regular resource crunch issues, because otherwise the resource crunch, the lack of judges, lack of funding hijacks the entire issue. And we've done enough work even earlier where we realized that this wasn't bearing up in terms of both funding and, the vacancies issue. So, which is why we cast our net a bit wider, and this is how we came to the issues that we finally wrote about.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I can see how maybe like that wasn't a part of your original hypothesis, but like a real discovery made, because it is in many ways breaking new ground. But can you shed a bit more light on that? I think there are parts of your book, I think elements where you speak, which I discovered, I didn't know for most part judges were on probation, the fact that that there are these, that they don't have immunity against, complaints can be filed against judgments they made, which I understand the US and other countries provide judges with that kind of immunity. So can you speak a little bit more about that for those who haven't read the book, offer a little bit more context around what your critical discoveries around the selection, transfer, disciplinary inquiry part of it, and maybe some of the key recommendations that you feel are needed in these areas?
Yeah, so let me start off on the disciplinary stuff. Chitrakshi can take over on the probationary and transfer issues. So just on disciplinary inquiries, we actually, there's only one professor at Jindal who's done some work on this as a part of his PhD thesis, Professor Shivraj Kuchavanal. So when we started, actually, there was nothing much. We came across this research a lot later. And one of the reasons that we dug a lot deeper is because we heard the then Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, say in more than one speech, and this was echoed by, I think, 1 or 2 other Supreme Court judges, that district court judges are afraid of giving bail which struck us as a little odd because, I mean, district court judges are insulated from the government quite effectively. So the question then presented itself as to who are they afraid of? And which is why we started digging into this. And when we stumbled into this rabbit hole, because we had no idea that district court judges were being disciplined at the rate that they were at, and for the issues that the disciplinary inquiries were being launched. For example, as we document in the book, there are cases where a judge has been disciplined and fired from her job for granting compensation in a land acquisition case that was too generous. There are cases where judges have been fired for granting bail too liberally. And these are cases where the courts have conceded, when the high courts, when review petitions were filed, they've conceded that there's no evidence of corruption, and yet they were fired. And then some of these judges were reinstated by, through the process of judicial review, either by the High Court or the Supreme Court. But the process is extremely long run. The judges in the land acquisition case, she fought her case for 14 years before she got back her job. So, I mean, this is one set of problems where their judgments are being picked up and they're being asked to explain their judgments in the course of inquiries. There's a second issue, which is even when there are allegations of corruption, the way disciplinary inquiries are conducted are quite Kafkaesque, in the sense that judges are not clearly told, what is the bribe that was paid to them, when did they receive it. The assumption is that, you received a bribe because somebody made an allegation. The allegation is generally the middleman approached somebody and solicited a bribe on behalf of the judge. And then after that, the court seems to put the burden on the judge to disprove the charge, which logically he cannot do if he doesn't know what exactly the outline of the charge is. So that is a second aspect. Chitrakshu, why don't you explain a little bit about the probationary issues and then perhaps move to transfer?
Sure. So there are two categories of judges which in fact have even lesser security than confirmed judges, which are probationers and judges who are about to reach their retirement age. So the probationers and these judges who have reached certain milestone ages, which are 52, 55, and 58, they are subjected to a performance review, and they can be dismissed if they are found deficient without they are not really given a hearing or written reasons for why they were dismissed. So they are particularly insecure, and these summary dismissals happen very frequently. The probationary period itself is sometimes extended beyond 2 years. We found multiple cases where there is really no limit on how long a probationer's tenure is supposed to be. They are often not confirmed within the 2 years that they are supposed to be confirmed in. And these judges are particularly vulnerable to being very reluctant to decide more risky and complicated cases because they have this sword hanging over their heads where they know that this review is coming and they need to play it safe. The judges which are compulsorily retired are in fact judges which are quite mature in their careers, and they are subjected to this annual performance review. And we found statistics through newspaper reports that since 2009, these judges have been fired in mass firing incidents. It's very difficult to track down individual cases because this data is not released. But we found reports where, for example, Gujarat High Court 12 judges fired 12 judges en masse under these compulsorily retirement reviews. So this is how we collected that data, and it was quite surprising. We found 106 instances of judges being fired since 2009 through these, through these mass firings. So these two categories of judges, probationers and judges who are reaching the mature milestone ages, are in fact more vulnerable to these summary dismissals. And they're not even given, as I mentioned, no reasons are given to them, neither are they afforded a hearing.
Perhaps just explain how compulsory retirement works.
Yeah. So once they reach so this is also a creation that has happened through the Supreme Court's intervention, in one of the All India Judges Association's cases, they had decided that these judges should be subjected to a performance review, which will decide whether they should continue in service or not. These rules have been challenged before the AP High Court, which declared them to be unconstitutional and said that this, in fact, makes this compromises the independence of the judges to decide freely. And when this went to the Supreme Court, they sort of dismissed the AP High Court decision in a very small one-paragraph judgment without explaining why they did so. And on the same basis, the challenge in the Gujarat High Court against these rules didn't really stand. So it's really interesting to see that the judges who are in fact at the professional, mature end of and they are subject to one supervising judge who will do this performance review, and they can, on the basis of their units on the entries in their ACR, the annual confidential records, if there are any adverse entry in the ACRs of these judges, any one such entry can become that pivot through which these judges are dismissed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Even pending, sorry, just one point, even pending disciplinary proceedings which have not been completed can also be a ground to compulsory retire a judge.
Wow. Wonderful. And I think, that sheds a lot of light. I would like you to both to also a little bit touch upon the topic of transfers and this aspect that you talked about, the ACRs, the annual confidential reports that is maintained with the judge, and you talk in your book a little bit about like what possible other ways of using either the unit system or not. So it would be great if you can also touch upon what are mechanisms for actual performance appraisals that you recommend, and before that a little bit on transfers and your suggestions around those.
Yeah, so transfers, is an interesting issue which I don't think has gotten enough attention except for one American academic, Carl Moog, who's written about it a little bit in the early 90s. Sorry, Robert Moog. Robert Moog. So one of the issues that we explore in the book is we try to raise the fundamental question of why are judges transferred, right? This has been an old colonial practice dating back to the 19th century, where ever since then, the district judiciary, the judges have been they are considered as a part of the state's civil services, right? So all the rules that apply to the civil services apply to the district judiciary. And transfers is something that used to happen to the bureaucracy of the state. So it also happened to the judges. Now, even back in the 19th century, there are reports written by British administrators where they are extremely unhappy with even the transfer of bureaucrats, because it would cause extreme disruption in services, etc. But at that point of time, it had to happen. They gave a bunch of reasons, including the fact that there were a lot of Europeans serving in the bureaucracy. They need to have long leave to go back home, etc. That would cause disruption, seniority in service, etc., etc. So these were all the reasons that they cited back then for transfers in the bureaucracy generally. Now, when it comes to transfers specifically of judges, we looked around transfer policies of high courts, and there is no real rationale. They don't explain what is the policy that they are seeking to, the policy objectives of transferring. The transfer policies only lay out the mechanics, that is, how will it work? But what exactly are you trying to achieve with transferring judges, given the disruption that it causes? So some of the common explanations that we hear, just in courtroom gossip or an anecdotal part. One is the common thing that you need to transfer judges to give them more exposure to different kinds of cases. Okay, now, even presuming that is the case, why do you have transfer policies in city-states like Delhi, where the pattern of litigation is almost the same across 13 judicial complexes? Second, even if this was a reason, does it outweigh the fact that so much disruption is caused every time a judge is transferred? And is it worth that? Do the benefits outweigh the costs of having such a transfer policy? The second reason that we generally hear of, justifying transfers is that if a judge is in a district for too long, he's going to become cozy with the lawyers and the litigants, and hence we need to disrupt. I mean, that's very spurious logic to justify transfers, because if that was the logic, then we should be transferring High Court judges also every 3 years, because a High Court judge spends her entire career the same city and the same and is facing with the same lawyers. And if corruption and nepotism is a concern with a judge, then that's a more serious issue. That's not going to be solved with transfers. You're just basically transferring rotten apples from here to there. And transfers, apart from being disruptive, also change the entire calculation when it comes to pendency, right? Because there are two concerns over here. One is an ordinary judge has to meet the unit system in order to get a good rating in his annual confidential report. So the unit system is basically, it's a quantitative measure for judges, wherein they need to dispose a certain number of cases every quarter or whatever the performance review cycle is. So for example, it can be 15 civil cases, 10 criminal cases, depending on the rank of the judge. Plus, he also gets certain units for different tasks that he does. So for example, for disposing an application, which is not considered disposing a case, he may get, say, 4 units. For cross-examination, he may get 1 unit. And he has to rack up a certain number of units plus a certain number of disposals in order to get a good rating. Now, if you are a judge sitting in a district, there are 2 concerns. Apart from the fact that you're going to meet this, you have to meet this rating, you are also worried about where you get transferred within the district. So there is district to district transfer. And then within the district, the judge can, your supervising judge can change your portfolio. So we've seen cases in Uttar Pradesh where a judge is holding a civil judge portfolio for 6 months, a judicial magistrate portfolio for 8 months during criminal cases. So you need to rack up your units as quick as possible, which means the way you're going to approach this as a logical human being looking at your own self-interest is you're going to pick the easiest cases and dispose them the first. And the harder cases, the more complex cases are going to fall back in the queue. Yeah. Add to this the fact that you're worried now about disciplinary mechanisms, how the disciplinary mechanism works. That's an added incentive to not tackle certain cases, because you know that within 2 years, I'm going to get transferred. This case is not going to be my headache. So essentially, you can never pin down responsibility for delays in a single case to one particular judge, because the docket is always revolving.
Yeah, thank you for that. And not to forget also the impact on family, relocation, schools, and all of those things that come with that. Yeah. Because I want to have enough time for a discussion, I'm just going to move forward. I know there's a lot here to unpack, but I know that in your book, you argue for what alternatives to, the unit-based system can be. You talk about eliminating probation as a mechanism, and maybe an opportunity for the high courts to, because eliminating transfers at one go might be hard, but to start at least staggering it out, like expand it from 3 to 5 years and maybe in a phased manner, do it, which I thought they were all interesting ideas. I just want to ask one last question and then open it out for everybody on the call to ask question, which is, I think the part which you enter into the second part of your book, which is around how judicial administration or court administration needs to improve. And the part that I found most interesting through this is, I think we can all safely assume that disputes and cases are only going to rise in the coming years. And if we really need to be able to equip ourselves for that, we really need to think, how do we optimize the time of judges? I think you say it so in your book, but I think there's wide agreement that the judges are the scarcest resource in the entire system, right? Like the entire justice system is designed around their ability, perspective to be able to resolve a case. And so it becomes imperative for us to optimize their time in the most effective manner. And I think there has been a lot of, whenever we talk about workload cases, the history has it that, let's look at judge to population ratio, or, we need this many judges per population, or one judge can handle X number of cases. And in your book, you argue for judicial time, most important factor for us to be able to make that real determination. So I'd love for you to touch a little bit more upon that, to say, how do we go about calculating judicial time in a country where data, statistics, etc. Is so weak, where we maybe just about know what happens in a courtroom, like say during the causeless hearing, maybe we can get data around that, but how do we go about collecting data on what judicial time can look like? But if you had to optimize a judge's role further than that, in your book, you do speak a little bit about outsourcing some roles. So maybe if you could just quickly touch upon that and we'll open it out for a discussion.
Yeah. Chitrakshi, why don't you take the issue of judicial time? But I just wanted to quickly tackle the alternatives to an ACR system, which we had discussed in the previous thing. So see, rather than have one supervising judge have all the power in, doing a performance review of a district court judge in a ACR, an annual confidential report, the better way perhaps is to devise a system where the judge gets feedback from the bar, from litigants, from court staff. So he gets he gets feedback from all quarters that he is interacting with. Because the idea at the end of the day of one of these performance assessment systems in the judicial context is to give the judge a chance to become better at his or her job. And there are mechanisms like this which exist in the US. The Bar Association does conduct reviews and gives feedback. So if we look at performance assessment systems as giving, a feedback loop to judges, then this is the better way to do it, rather than giving all the power to one supervising judge, because that also compromises decisional independence of the judge in question. It's actually over to you on judicial time and having a specialized office.
Yeah, so I'll start with the question of the efficiency of court bureaucracies, which we deal with. So there are two levels to that problem. One is, of course, the staff that assists a judge in a district court, but there is also the upper management of this process, which is generally the high court registries, which have multiple administrative functions. So most of the work that is done at the level of the high court, which is administrative in nature, is done through administrative committees, which are assisted in turn by registrars who are judges who are on deputation at the high court. So these are senior judges who have spent most of their careers adjudicating and who now have to work as administrators assisting the high court judges. And we recommend that it's actually these administrative committees which have to take very crucial policy decisions on how the infrastructure and budgetary planning for the entire judiciary should be done, for the entire state judiciary. And they are really ill-equipped to handle this task. And therefore, we recommend that there should be a specialized agency which not only looks at the question of recruitment reform, because that is also a problem at the level of the district courts. Are you recruiting on time? For example, in Uttar Pradesh, if you have 3,600 sanctioned judges for sanctioned posts for judges, you have almost 6 times that for the court administration. So approximately 18,000, an army of bureaucrats is assisting the judges to perform those judicial functions. The other problem is there are a lot of these skills and the eligibility criteria for these roles hasn't changed very much. Clearly, the demands of how to look at judicial statistics and how to, collect these statistics and all the other functions in the courts are undergoing a transformation, but these skills really haven't been updated. So you need more competent these eligibility criteria need to be revised at the level of the court administration in a district, and of course at the upper management levels where all these functions are being undertaken in an ad hoc manner through these administrative committees who are also in turn assisted by judges who have no training in personnel management or in budgetary planning, etc. These are really not the people, this is not the best use of their time. They should be judging. The second question is of judicial time, more specifically in how we collect statistics. So currently, in the way the National Judicial Data Grid reports statistics on different cases, they have no measure for basically, we have no idea about the complexity of a case because we don't know which kinds of cases are taking more time. Is there really a correlation with how complicated that case is? And that is really what we need to understand to calculate everything else that is dependent on this statistic. For example, if you need to know how many judges you need to know what is the portfolio of litigation in that particular region, how much time is a particular case which is more complicated, has probably more witnesses, is a more complicated land acquisition case versus perhaps a check bouncing case, which is fairly easy. So those are the things that we need to focus on and figure out how much time a particular kind of case, a judge's time a particular case is taking to have everything that is built on, the architecture that is built on that crucial statistic.
Thank you so much for that. There is a lot more, I think, on each of those topics and others that we could delve on. But I would love to now open it up to everyone who's here to ask questions, either directed to Chitrakshi and Prashant relating to the book or the aspects they've mentioned, but also to share your own observations or insights based on these. So opening up the floor now. Yeah, Ishant.
Hello.
Yeah, Ishant, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I'm Sam and I'm just a fresh graduate from NLU, but
You are breaking
I
up.
don't think I can.
I could start hearing him, but no longer. Ishant, can I request
Could you just
to
type it out?
type it out and we
Am I
we'll-
audible now?
Yeah, better.
Yeah. So I'll just introduce myself again. Sorry, just I think network issue. I couldn't turn on my video. But I've just graduated from NLU Punjab, like 2025, and currently I'm working on this project, researching courtroom realities through bodily experience. Like what happens when you go into a courtroom as a litigant or as a visitor? What's your response in there? And during that process, I actually had one of the sessions with Kirtan, and I'm glad to see her again. So I think, and I've been following your book in the media, like Scroll and other places, and would really like to grab a copy of it. And I think I just want to give this reflection that, most of the places that I have researched for a couple of months and district courts in Delhi, and seeing your book, it fills a lot of gap in there when how we imagine our courtrooms. But again, I think the experience of being in a courtroom, of going into a litigant, and that I've spoken to people as a course of my research, how, like, let's say the day I went in a black and white attire, I had more access across the courtroom complex. But the day I decide to go in a pink tote bag in a trench coat, suddenly, I'm shunned away, and or maybe, a lot of junior lawyers are trying to solicit me as a client. So I think these kind of stories and experience also need to be included when we reimagine our criminal justice system or our courtrooms, how they function. So this is something that I'm working on, that it will be coming out as an exhibition. But during my research, like, I really followed your guys' books, and I really think it fills an important gap. So I think from mine, it's not a question, but sort of a reflection and sort of a thank you that you guys are actually filling up a kind of gap that at least I have felt, all 5 years. Because I also worked with India Justice Report for a longer bit. So some of the work that they did, I like, it's an amazing, really thanks. Just that, like, as a reader or to be reader of your book. So thank you guys for the book. That's just
Thank you so
feedback.
much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ishant. But on your point on the experience of the ordinary person in the courtroom, that's one of the reasons that we are asking for juries to come back. Chitrakshi, maybe you should take the lead on this, on how the jury
Yeah,
perhaps
so
will change the equation.
Yeah, so mostly ordinary citizens enter courtrooms only in very limited capacities, either as witnesses or litigants, and their experience is one of hierarchy. And we do think that bringing back juries where citizens participate in adjudication in a decision-making capacity will change that relationship. And that will also bring more transparency into a system which is very visibly undergoing a legitimacy crisis. And we have seen that in other societies where there are suspicions about how fair the judiciary is, especially to the elites, these systems have been introduced, like South Korea and Japan, very recently in the last decade. So we do think that there is a case to be made that juries should be reintroduced, given that we had a tradition of juries, for the longest time, and they were probably not uniform across the country, but like in Bengal, etc., and Bombay, they were a popular institution, and and this is when the criteria to serve on juries wasn't fully democratic, like it was not representative. So if we reimagine juries and reintroduce them, I do think that sort of hierarchical relationship that ordinary citizens feel with courtrooms in general and with the lawyers and judges as a profession would change.
Yeah, once you're a decision maker in the institution, it will change things. Justice Sridevan has a hand up.
Yeah.
Yes.
A very brief, whatever comment. First of all, I was very happy that there was a great deal of empathy in both of you while talking of the district judges. And so I felt that it has to be translated in Indian languages. They should know that there are researchers who are thinking of them and their difficulties. So that was one bouquet I would like to offer you.
Thank you.
Then about the transfers.
Thank you so much.
See, my father was a railway man. He was transferred 17 times. So to talk of difficulties is something that they get into the service knowing that it is a job, right? And if to make one judge stay in the same district, in Tamil Nadu, I'm sure Justice Gautam Patel will also say the same thing. There are certain districts which are prize districts, there are certain districts which are punishment districts. So to make one judge get stuck with either the prize district or the punishment district is unfair. It's not the same judge who is writing. Because for us too, the districts change, our portfolio districts change. So it's not one mind which is constantly writing the ACR. So these are just two small points, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who want to say, but you have to think again about the transfers. Then I'll come again if I have time.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Can I jump in here on a couple of things? I don't know if somebody else is waiting and has raised a hand, you can take them first.
Prajwal has, but if it's connected to what Justice Prabha said, then you can go.
It takes off from what she's saying.
Maybe
and
we take that and then we'll come to Prajwal after that.
All right. So now there have been 5 or 6 different issues that have come together here in the course of the last 20 minutes. Let me just show you this. I've been a portfolio judge for 3, 4, 5 districts, and I understand the problem that you've had in collecting data because it's notoriously difficult to get. And I don't think it should be difficult to get. But the result is that it's somewhat skewed. And I'm saying this from personal experience because I've dealt with this for a very, very long time. The cases that you're seeing that come in the law reports or in the newspapers are actually a very small fraction of what comes our way. The kill rate, if I can coin a phrase, for knocking off complaints against judges is higher than 99%. That gives you an idea of the volume that you are dealing with.
Oh, wow.
So we routinely get, and I'm talking about in Maharashtra, which is the largest judiciary in terms of court halls and the second largest in the country in terms of judicial officers, have to meet every week to deal with this. And the first item on the agenda is, well, there are 2 things. One is this disciplinary thing, which takes a bulk of the time. We knock off 99% of it after following a fairly well-established protocol. We don't even call for a response from the judge in the bulk of the cases because on a first seeing of what that complaint is, we knock it off there. If it's anonymous, for example, we trash it. Number 1. Number 2, if the person has a remedy of an appeal, the fact that a judgment has gone against him doesn't mean that the judge is corrupt or something has to be done. We knock it off there and then. It's in the odd case that you will ask for a response from the judge because you have to have a list of balance, the number of complaints and so on and so forth. Having said that, there are some complaints that are so hideously egregious that it's impossible to describe. I mean, I'm not going to take names, But what do you do when you've got material before you that shows a judge putting out on social media photographs of him sitting half naked on an upturned bucket? And there are cases, I've dealt with this. And there are cases of very serious cases of sexual harassment against judges by colleagues, by staffers, and so on. You can't take these things lightly. Now, I understand your problem. You don't have access to this data, and I think that that's one form of ring fencing. We have to figure out some method by which some of this data with some filters is made available. But the damage to a judge if this gets out is incalculable. Okay, so another few minutes, please. The question of ACRs is one that has bothered me for a long time because you're right. The ACRs try and turn everything into numerical data, and they're absolutely worthless because we have to give marks out of 15 on whether the judge has been courteous with staff. I mean, how would I know? I mean, I don't even care. Is he on good terms with or pally with his colleagues? I don't know. What difference does that make? Is this a condition of judgeship that you should be on buddy terms with your colleagues? No, it's not. But these are metrics that have been designed unthinkingly in these ACRs. And of course, the ACRs need to be qualitative, not quantitative. Now, the disposal rates is something that I have a real problem with because it flattens meaninglessly cases irrespective of case type. As you said, a check bouncing case is relatively easy to do. But if any judge, and this routinely happens, why is your case disposal low? Because I was handling a CBI case. CBI, if you've ever been to a CBI trial, the fellow comes with a trunk full of documents. There's no prep. He rummages through this, pulls out one document, tells his lawyer, "Ispe sawal kijiye." What is that lawyer supposed to do? So 4 questions in a day is what happens in cross-examination. And the response from the supervisory high court is exert more pressure. Now, exert more pressure is a meaningless statement. Are you talking about this digestive system? What does this even mean? What is he supposed to do in a situation like this? It's completely meaningless. Now, this has to be more nuanced. It has to be more calibrated. On the question of transfers, Justice Sridevan is correct. You know, in Maharashtra, and I'm sure this happens in Tamil Nadu, though I don't have personal experience of it, of the districts. There are prime districts and everybody wants to be transferred there. Pune is one, Thane is another, Bombay is a third. Life is more comfortable and its proximity to power and money makes it a lure. You should see the number of transfer applications we get. Some of the transfer applications are actually laughable if you follow the trajectory. As Justice Sridevan said, you walked into this knowing it's a transferable job. Okay, so that's one. Like all government jobs are transferable. Foreign service, forest service, revenue service, all of them. All right. First application for transfer, I'm about to get married. Second application, my children are too small. Third, my children are growing up. Fourth, my children have grown up and they are about to get married. And fifth, my parents are now old. What do you do? What do you do in a situation like this? And Justice Sridevan will have had this experience exactly. Routinely, you reject them. Now, we make the allowance if somebody needs, for example, cancer treatment, which can only be got at a particular place. We make that allowance. Of course, we do. We make sure that husband and wife are generally not separated because that's enormously disruptive. But you have to have some structure to this. And the last point I want to make is that, look, I've read the book. There are many, many things that I disagree with. There are things that I feel are anecdotal, but I think it's a good start to actually trying to get more information out of this. On the question of why judges are reluctant to grant bail, now that I've retired and joined Justice Sridevan's ranks, I am no longer constrained, so I can say the fault is the Supreme Court. Entirely. When you do give reasons, the Supreme Court says, why do you give so many reasons for granting bail? When you don't give reasons, They say, why have you not given reasons? So nobody knows what to do. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Grant bail, you're damned. Don't grant bail, you're damned. No, and obviously the judge, as you said, wants to save his own skin. Not my problem. I'm going to be transferred in 6 months' time. I'm up for the annual general transfers, the AGTs. Forget about it. Push it off. The commercial corruption element is a serious one, but it is handled very differently in most cases. There are outlier cases, and there is one area which you've missed completely in this analysis, which I think is a very, very significant factor. There is a huge play of caste politics in this. Enormous. I mean, I cannot tell you how severe and severely damaging it is. One caste will favor that caste at the cost of the other caste, will write bad reports, will make complaints. This kind of thing happens all the time. Okay, last 2 points. That on the feedback to the judges, look, I'm against it here because if we started turning this into a popularity contest, this would never end. And it's not. Justice Oakes said this when he retired, that it's not a popularity contest. I'm not afraid to offend anybody. I have to be firm in my decision making. That doesn't matter. The feedback from, we've got this feedback. The feedback from people is really, really so oddball that there is no filter system. Now, if you're saying there should be feedback, I'm saying, all right, fair enough. If there is feedback, what's the filter to the feedback? Because otherwise it's noise.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a hell of a lot of noise. And for judges at any level, it's an enormous amount of pressure because, oh, somebody said that you spoke harshly to him. What am I supposed to do? Does anybody factor in that he was being mulish, silly, or that he raised his voice and triggered a response? Judges are under pressure. Now, on juries, look, I don't know whether anybody here has ever handled a jury trial, and I have because Bombay has this unique
For Parsis.
thing of the Parsi. Now, they're fine. There's a short list of people from whom you got to pick. They're all dying to be on the jury because it's extremely salacious. You get to know what's happened between this couple in a matrimonial dispute. Trying to keep the jury on track on law is a very difficult business. And please, let's remember this. In jury trials, typically, there is no appeal on facts. This is a huge problem. The appeal will be on a law. And in India, instructions to the juries is not an art form the way it is in the US and in the UK. The judge's instructions to the jury are tested. Here I've seen judgments where there was no instructions to the jury. They fired off something and the statute says no appeal lies on facts. Now, allied to that is the question, which case would you have a jury? You can't have it in a writ petition. That's a constitutional question. Are you going to do this in a commercial dispute which involves complex legal documents and pull the man from the street and tell him to understand a waterfall mechanism in a structured financial deal? He's not going to tag along rights, put options, call options. How are you going to explain this? Now, which is the case, therefore, that you would recommend that we should have juries? Privacy becomes a big issue. And we don't have a system of sequestering juries. Now, in a defamation case, do you want 9, 5, 7, 12 people listening to the defamatory material and then going home and chattering about it? See, the Nanavati case took an odd turn, and it was for that reason that the Law Commission said get rid of this, because it was a jury decision that was completely unsustainable in law. It was unsustainable in law. It was the one matter that triggered this. I don't think that bringing juries back is going to bring back the citizen to the courtroom. I accept the principle that it's not citizen-centric. I accept that. But I don't think juries are the solution. I think there are other solutions. Maybe when time permits a longer discussion another day. But juries will not address this. And let me tell you, juries will delay the system even more. Because by the time you find the jury, impanel the jury, test the jury, have your voir dire, remove people. You'll have to have 24 and drill them down to 12 and go through that testing process. How are you going to manage that in the current situation we're in? It's not going to work. See, the pendency issue is, I've been saying this to people at Dutch, we are looking at the wrong metric. This is what I want to advocate. Please, for God's sake, stop talking about pendency. It's a gigantic number. It's a very attractive number for people to have discussions. And often when you're holding a whiskey glass in your hand, oh, you're a judge. What are you doing about pendency? Nothing. I'm dealing with the cases that are on my list. I'm soldiering through them. That's all that I'm doing. A better statistic is the disposal rates. Map the disposal rates per judge and see if they're going up or down, and then ask why they're going up and down. Are they going up and down because of a case type or for some other reason? See, a case is not pending the moment it is filed. Prashant, let's understand this. I file a civil suit. It goes into my statistic of pending cases. It's not ready for disposal. It needs a written statement. It needs directions. It needs evidence. All of this stuff, documents have to be marked in evidence. Then it is ready for a trial. And then it is ready for arguments. It is not pending the day it is filed. Yet, our pendency measure, filed, pending. If you made this nuanced, granular distinction, your pendency figures will crash. They're bound to crash. A writ petition is not pending 8 times out of 10 because you issue notice, you call for a response from the other side. Till that comes in, it's not ready. The judge can't decide it. Now, take any of us. We are respondents or defendants. The judge says, I'm disposing this off now. You'll say, hello, I need to be heard. My lawyer's not free. I want to put in an affidavit reply. Till then, it's not pending. See, every case has a life cycle. And the pendency has to be measured against that life cycle of that particular case type before it enters the pendency figures. It's astonishing because we did this. Let me just, Supriya, sorry, let me just take a minute. This is actual experience which is unreported, so we have some interest to both. So once we got the NJDG, I said, very interesting, because I was on this computer committee in heading it. I said, come on, give me a statistic of which are the maximum pending cases. We found that the bulk of the pendency, the so-called pendency, was in execution, darkhast proceedings. I said, okay, fine, fair enough. Tell me, now break that down further. Tell me why they are pending in execution. We got 3 or 4 reasons. One, stayed by the Supreme Court. Fairly sizable number, which can be done by the Supreme Court by allocating those cases and saying, get rid of them, but not being done. 2, stayed by the High Court. Same problem, same issue, not addressed. Third, there is this bucket category called for any other reason. So I said, hello, this makes no sense. What is any other reason? This is, I'll tell you what any other reason. The executing court has passed an order. Somebody's filed an appeal. Appeal is sitting there. It's not listed. It's not moved. But because an appeal is filed, the executing court will not move. Execution stayed. Pending, pendency added. And I'll tell you, the single biggest problem, and Prashant, maybe you want to look at this at some point. The big failure is that we are not leveraging, forget about AI, we are not even leveraging the ordinary queries that we can generate against NJDG. We tested this, and I think it's somewhere on the Bombay High Court website. I said, give me a heat map of pending cases split by category. Cases against women, cases against senior citizens, cases by senior citizens, so on and so forth, and where they are. Because by that time, we had done a topographical injection into the system and we done a demographic injection. I found heat maps of cases filed by women in hilly areas of Maharashtra. No, that becomes important because those are inaccessible courts. They're so remote that they're difficult to get to. Now, this kind of a mapping exercise into a bar chart, we actually did it on a graphical map, tells you where you need more judges, which means your transfers. Which of the judges you need to send there, because generally the feeling is that if there are women's cases, you need to move the women there. And where you need more court halls, if there's an insufficient number of court halls. There is a gold mine of data sitting there in the NJDG, which is not even being, I mean, that tap hasn't even been turned, and there'll be a flood at the end of it. You deploy AI into this, you will get astonishing results and recommendations. I promise you, I've just scratched the skin of it, the surface of it, in trying to get distributions. All I've done is get distribution. But the distributions have to be the base for a policy decision. And last thing, this assumption that India is full of potential judges who are of high quality, completely wrong. I mean, you sit in on the interviews, as Justice Sridharan will tell you, and you want to shoot yourself in the head. You ask a civil judge who's doing civil law, what is an English mortgage? And the answer is, it's a mortgage made in England. I mean, seriously? These are the answers we've got. Rashtrapati Bhavan. Really? This is their grip on law. Now you have to sift through this in some way. You try and get the best of them. Judges in Bombay don't want to become High Court judges. Over leveraged in terms of their houses, offices, all the rest of this. They want to send their children to, well, the best schools, which cost double-digit lakhs a year. How is this possible on a judge's salary? See, if you want to become a High Court judge today, the only way you can do it, apart from political affiliation, which I don't want to do, is you have to be debt-free. And you have to be potentially debt-free. Otherwise, this is not going to work. Justice Sridharan and I got out in the nick of time. He was well ahead of the curve, but I'm telling you, it would have been ruinous. And then when you have the uncertainty of the collegium process chucked into the mix, why would anyone say yes? There are legendary stories about all of this happening. Why would anyone say yes? It's a complex of factors here. The judge's appointment process is a separate political animal that we'll have to deal with, and it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
Supreme Court, High Court, accountability. Transparency starts with appointment. Transparency must start with appointment. Accountability, you have to set standards. Now, South Africa had a very interesting accountability standard, which I don't know why we've not adopted. If a judge has not delivered a judgment after having heard a case within X days, whatever that is, 90 days, 120 days, take a figure, he is called to account. But you know what happens here? I finish hearing one case for 2.5 days or 3 days. There's a huge record I have to get to. I don't have time off to reflect, to write that judgment. Conversation with the judge this morning. He says, I'm churning these out. I don't have time to reflect, and the quality of my judgments is suffering as a result. One of the topmost judges of the Bombay. This is because I've got 75 cases behind me. That's the difficulty there. How do you deal with it in a situation like this? Every court is short judges. Every court.
So I think what I'm hearing is really that even if we're not converging on agreeing on what the solution is, there's
Subira, I'm saying it's a mistake to look for solutions. I'm saying and I think this is why this book is important. I think this book is important because you identify the problems. Forget about the solution. The solutions may be many, and different people will have different solutions. I think this book is important. I may disagree with parts of it. I may have a different point of view, but it's identifying problems, the choke points in the judicial throughput process.
Yeah.
It's identifying
I think
some of them. There may be others. There may be others.
for
I
sure.
grant
And
that
I
there may
think
be others.
that is, I think the fresh part of the contribution is really shedding light on issues around selection,
Yeah,
appointment,
but
transfer.
our mistake is that we are constantly in search of answers without being able to define what our questions are.
Completely agree.
And I
Completely
think
agree.
Prashant and Chitra have done a damn good job in actually giving us a laundry list of some of those questions. They've given some solutions. You may or may not agree with the solution. Separate matter.
Yeah, but I think it has struck a nerve. I think I've spoken to many, even district court judges, and I think it does resonate. I think the issues definitely resonate, and
But I would caution against getting distracted by the solutions that the book offers. I'm sorry, I don't mean that in a negative sense.
yeah.
Because there are
It's fine. We don't take it to that way. Yeah.
As a test, take this book and distill from it in no more than 2 pages the questions that it raises.
Yeah.
Just get the questions in.
Yeah.
The procedures in court are faulty, which you deal with towards the end of the book. The procedures are antiquated in execution for attachment by beat of drum. Seriously.
Even for summons, there's beat of drum.
Shall I tell you what one of our biggest problems? I was talking to Justice Muralidhar about this today is because of a change in law. The privacy law is going to affect how you effect service of the simplest thing. Because privacy, if it's a constitutional right, and let's say you've got a defamation case, or let's say you've got a posh case, or you've got a matrimonial case, or you've got something which has commercial confidence in it, you don't want that passing through 5,000 hands, a patent action. You don't want that passing through 5,000 hands before it gets to the defendant. It has to go end to end in seal, which means physical systems of delivery. And in countries where physical accessibility is remote, I'll end on this. Reasons for transfer, you're going to love this. One judge in Chandrapur, my wife left me because there was a python across the kitchen counter when she woke up in the morning. Second judge in Nandurpar wants to leave because he wakes up, goes out, stretches and finds tiger pug marks there. So I'm not staying here. Catches the next bus out. What do you do in a situation like this? No electricity, no water. We haven't built the infrastructure for courts. We are refusing to build the infrastructure for courts. We have lady judges saying they have no toilets.
But Justice Patel, why is that? Because
they have no water supply. Listen, I'm biased. Okay, I'm telling you this. Forget about the men. Please attend to the needs of the women in service first. They are being completely disregarded. I'm saying this despite gender. It is horrific. I would want no woman in my family to join this because I know what they will have to suffer. Zero privacy. Go and use that common staff law, or go and use you're passing through advocates, criminals standing there, using some loo there. I mean, seriously. Seriously. A government can't build a toilet. Builds a court hall, but not a chamber and not a toilet. No drinking water.
Thank you, Justice Patel. I think these.
Sorry, I've overdone.
Oh, no, not at all. I think
Sorry.
incredibly
not at all.
well.
It was very interesting.
Yeah,
I
it
think-
was very useful also.
Yeah, I think
But
things
you
that.
should do this in person, no? We can then spend a little more time.
But I think it has all the makings for a much longer half a day or a full day conversation. But I want to come to Prajwal. I know, so sorry you've had your hand raised for a while.
Sorry, guys.
Not at all, sir. Thank you so much.
I will mute myself now.
Just don't. Yeah, Prajwal.
Thank you, Justice Patel. I think all the questions I wanted answers for, he preempted, and like most of them is answered already. So I don't have. So I just want, like, probably even Prashant and Chitrakshi or Justices Sridevan or Justice Patel might answer this whole question. we've seen this whole question or this topics about supervising or administering of judges coming through, where High Court judges supervises or administers what a kind of judge when the High Court judge sits in judgment of the trial court judge. At the same time, he also sits in disciplinary proceedings, decides that judges transfers or not. There's a lot, and again, when it comes to even per se the High Court, also many of the judges, apart from doing judicial work, also do a lot of administrative work, like Chitrakshi was telling. Maybe is there any thought or anywhere, if there's any academic material, I'd be loving to actually look into it. If there has been talks about separating judicial administrative powers from judicial powers per se, on the lines of UPSC, like probably Union Judicial Services Commission, where you completely divide what all the administrative powers of judges are. Let there be a separate branch. Let that judge decide who gets transferred, or let the judge decide which judge gets which roster. Let the judge decide.
No, Prajwal, you're warm but not hot. Let me tell you, they've nailed it on one. There is no assessment or no thought spared in our system to judicial time. Now, let me tell you what I mean by this. As a judge, there are things that only a judge can do, especially in a constitutional court. And there are things that a judge should not be asked to do. All right? I'll give you an example. Judging, the process of judging, reading cases, delivering judgments, correcting judgments, writing orders, is the judge's job, can't be delegated, number one. The supervisory thing is also something that I think is not delegatable. It has to go through a filter of somebody saying, this has substance, this has no substance, just as you have clerks in the US Supreme Court who tell you whether this is covered. We have that system. There is a vigilance registrar who's quite well trained, and they sift this through. It comes with their recommendations. We're not reading it from scratch. Where we waste monumental amounts of time is in handling routine contracts that the government should take care of. Now, if there's a procurement contract for the High Court, now let me tell you, for the High Court, for example, in Bombay, when it wants to buy iPads, it's not buying 1 and 2, it's buying 2,400. So Apple is doing handstands, they're saying, what more can we offer you? Now, I'm not bothered with this. How am I bothered with the liquidated damages clause? How am I bothered with the technical specification? How am I bothered with seeing whether the supplied materials meet specifications? That's not my job. It takes an insane amount of judges' time doing what is not even judicial administrative work, but non-judicial administrative work. That has to be filtered out.
Yeah, so there is one paper which is written, which we cited in our book, by Ajay Shah and one of the present judges of the Bombay High Court, Somsekhar Sundaresh. There are 10 authors to that paper, where they basically pitch for having something like the system in the UK, where they have a courts and tribunal service.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that is one recommendation which has done the rounds. So basically, I mean, see, there are 3 administrative layers, right, in the judiciary. One is upper management, are the administrative committees of the High Court judges who are taking key policy decisions, key disciplinary issues. There's mid-management, which is the registrars of the High Courts, who are the interface between the administrative committee and the district courts. And then in the district courts also, there are registrars to manage the courts. For example, I think the magistrates court in Bombay, there are about 75 judges. I think they have close to 600 staff members. And there's a layer of registrars there who are supposed to do all the heavy lifting. So there are some aspects which definitely can be transferred. So for example, specialized issues, especially like infrastructure.
It's a matter of trust. If you don't trust your registrars, you don't trust them to take the right decision, and you're second guessing the decisions all the time. Now, let me tell you, should I have an 11-inch iPad or should I have a 12.9-inch iPad? So 2 judges will disagree. So there'll be a vote. Then it'll go to the Chief Justice. There'll be no iPad for the Chief Justice to see. So one of us desperately phones a lawyer and says, please go and show the Chief Justice your iPad. So he lifts one, then he lifts another and says, this is good enough.
This sounds like a true life story.
It is. It has.
Yeah.
I was not even here. I had to phone someone from overseas saying, will you please take your iPad and go there and show it to him?
Yeah.
Madness.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the point, right? So at least see for some specialist issues like say infrastructure, right? You need specialists to be making those kind of decisions, even for
The problem
human
is that they don't
resources.
trust the government. If it passes into the hands of the government and these are funds allocated for the High Court, the government will not spend. Then you need supervision.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
But
You need a
there
separate
are
agency.
mechanisms, for example,
correct.
like
You're
in the US, right? You have
You're
a
right.
judicial administrative office operating within the judiciary under the
Correct.
control of the Chief Justice of the
That
High
is
Court,
correct. That is exactly right.
but staffed by
exactly right.
experts.
Staffed and funded.
So, yeah, staffed by experts and funded. So there is room for mechanisms like that because
Of course.
see the size of the bureaucracy administering the courts. I think the last figure that we have quoted in our book, Chitakshi, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think is close to 240,000 bureaucrats.
Yeah.
And there's some 70,000 vacancies over there. So this is a massive organization working behind the judges who need full-time management. You cannot expect judges to, manage these guys and do their judicial tasks. So
British
that's
not to answer for. They gave us this bureaucracy and we took to it like a duck to water.
yeah, we loved it.
We love this bureaucracy. Just absolutely can't live without it wherever you go.
And it's a crucial part, right? Like, for example, something as simple as process servers, right? This is an issue. Like, if a process server is the person who has to go serve the summons on the defendant. Now, this is an issue that has been raised for the last literally 100 years because the Rankin Committee, which came out in 1925, there's an entire section there complaining about process servers, the shortage and the corruption both.
Yeah.
So, like process servers is, I think Siddharth Raman and Supriya and all have been doing some work on process servers and perhaps how they can be, the role that they play.
I want to digitize them. I want to get rid of the human being.
Yeah, that's one way to. That's one way to go ahead.
Digital mechanism for process serving. Knock off the human beings.
Yeah. So there are all these solutions, but it gets very little public attention because everyone's too focused on judges shortages and etc. etc.
No, and this conversation that if we had enough judges to solve the problems, it's just nonsensical.
Yeah, exactly.
Because not all judges decide the same cases at the same speed in the same
productivity.
way. Yeah, it's a huge issue.
Yeah. Govind sir, I'd love for you to come in. We can't hear you, so you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much from the Agami team to letting me join this wonderful session. Actually, I haven't read about this book, but I got a good idea about this book, about the discussions after discussion. Being a trial court judge and already spent 10 years in these services, but hearing Mr. Justice Patel, sir, it was wonderful, sir. And I'm happy to know that the same situation that you're facing in the Maharashtra, sir. I myself has faced the situation, like when I was coming out from the my chamber and I saw a guy, he was because there was no public toilet, so I had to face that situation. And same with was the a female also. It was she was a litigant there. But wonderful, sir. Actually, it's not the wonderful thing, but this is the scary state. This is a scary picture of the court infrastructure in our system, sir. The important point that I want to add this whole thing is that the book, sir, when we are talking about the court time, sir, we have somewhere you have mentioned about that the specialized agency should be there. But I think, sir, in the courts, we already have this court manager post in all over India. And to be frank, sir, the whole experience, because they are supposed to do the work of administrative work under the authority of a trial court judge. But somewhere they are failing in their duty because of this again the ego issue between the permanent staff of the court, like the senior Muslim and this court manager. And because of that, sir, they're not doing their work that they're supposed to do, and they are being paid good enough for this. And recently,
they're not being allowed. They're not being allowed to do the work they paid.
Exactly, sir. Exactly, and because of the ego issue, sir. So hiring a specialized agency, again, I don't think so it will work more, but having a different administrative setup for a trial in a trial court, I think might work, and appointing the judges who have good experience in administration, that can work better rather than having a specialized agency from the court managers or something like that. That's my view, sir. And that's it from my side. And I think I'm gonna read this book, and I'm gonna suggest this book for the put this book before the honorables, also for the Rajasthan High Court. And I'll put this in the library, and will ask the trainee officers, who are 200 officers are currently here, sir. So they are being under training. So I will ask them to read this book, because this is, I think this is one of the book. And seriously, one of the first point that one of the speaker added is that it's wonderful that people are now started talking about the gap, because like in the government system, generally you don't, and the judiciary particularly, you don't get to find the people who criticize your own system. So it's like yes man system. So it's good that someone is talking about them, and the gap is being filled by the people from outside. But I would love to have all these things in the academy also, sir. So thank you so much, sir, from my side.
You know, Prashant,
Thank you so much.
if we had, sorry, so just give me half a minute. If we had some standardized measures for basic infrastructure for judges, not just dimensioning the court, but what the court should contain, and that there must be a judge's chamber attached to it, and what that chamber must contain, I think a great deal of the problem would be solved. I was in 2017 in Goa, and I actually had to put a stop to what was being suggested by one of the district judges, because it was being given accommodation, it had to be redone. He'd gone off the top and got himself all kinds of fancy fittings throughout the house and stuff like this. And the chief secretary was sitting next to me. I said, listen, this proposal is cancelled. It's on hold. I want a standardized system for all judges across both districts. It has to be the same. The chairs have to be the same. There will be a tussle about who has a better chair. I'm seeing this happening all the time. He's got this chair. I want that chair. How much did that chair cost? I want mine to be 15,000 rupees more expensive. Frankly,
NCM,
there are two things. There's one is the infrastructure, and the second is that, look, this is in any objective enterprise of this size, you would say this is a management problem that requires the introduction of specialist management consultants, system consultants, chaps who can analyze your system, find what the choke points are. But this is what judges are compelled to do. They're tinkering around. They don't have the expertise. They don't have management expertise. They don't have systems expertise. They're just fiddling around with this on the periphery.
But
so-
I'll ask a question, and correct me if I'm wrong. If some specialized agency comes, there'll be this hue and cry about confidentiality, this, that.
It's going to happen.
So everything has to be kept behind iron doors, so we won't let anybody in. That will be
One supplement I want, which is a chapter which I think I'm suggesting the title, called The Paranoid Judge.
That is the subtext in our book.
Well, I know, but you need a
Transparency.
chapter on paranoia, because
Yeah.
it is the definition of how, oh, this is confidential, oh, this will leak out, oh, this
Yeah.
will go. Listen,
And then there is one catchphrase.
courtrooms
Then
are
the
like
floodgates will open.
yeah,
Where
floodgates will
floodgates?
open. Your courtrooms are like
Floodgates
bazaar.
open where?
Where? They're already open. All horses are bolted. I have, in practice, I have been to a solicitor's office in his conference room. I looked around me horrified because there were original court records from the testamentary department. I said, what is happening here? They said, sir, don't ask. These matters were not supposed to reach, so papers have gone missing.
Oh,
What confidentiality? What is this confidentiality we're talking about?
Oh, God.
anyway.
I am prepared. This I've seen myself, so this is not third-party information. I can name the attorney's firm and give you the address. But, I mean, it's just absurd. Papers are not traceable. Oh, sorry, they're not traceable. Digitize the lot. They can't go missing. Simple.
Yeah.
They'll never
Yeah,
go
I mean,
missing.
record management has been the,
Exactly.
the Achilles heel of the Indian state.
Every
All arms,
high court
government,
is a
judiciary.
court of record, which means that every high court is basically a go down.
Mm.
A large chunk of it is a go down.
Yeah.
Outsource it, send the papers in Bombay off to Bhiwandi or in Chennai to whatever the remotest corner of Chennai and link it up with a cable. That's all you need to do. You don't need it sitting there.
I think some states have started, some high courts have digitized and cleaned
Not
up their.
enough. Supriya's banging
their
her head
art-
against this.
I saw in Orissa they were doing a good job.
Yeah.
Justice Muralidhar started and his
Yeah.
pick was this.
Yeah.
Get rid of the paper from the registry and 80% of your problems get solved.
He started it there. At
But-
least I don't know where it landed, but it was progressing very well at one point of time. But yeah.
But if I can just get back, to this issue of how, like, what standards for infrastructure. I think 10 years ago, the NCMS did come out with certain
Correct.
baseline parameters for litigants, I
Yeah.
think. And the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, before I joined,
Correct.
they had done a very elaborate survey from the
Correct.
litigants' perspective, not from, because those are the only areas that surveyors could access.
Yeah, but what about the judge's
Uh,
perspective?
Yeah, no, but that's what I mean. You couldn't enter the areas which judges only can access. But see this. So after that, what happened? After the Vidhi report came out, I think when Justice Bobde was the Chief Justice,
Yes.
they had commissioned an internal survey wherein they had sent out a questionnaire to district courts asking them to answer certain questions, and they were kind enough to share the report with us. One of the few things the Supreme Court Registry shared
Yeah.
with us under the RTI Act. But I'm not sure what was the standards that they use. But yeah, I think that's a low-hanging fruit for somebody to work on.
That
Just
should be
setting
like not as
parameters.
politically controversial as many of the other things. So that should be
Yeah.
a relatively
And if you could push like a Chief Justice of a High Court to commission a survey based on these parameters, we can clearly identify where the shortcomings are, which can then be used, used in the next round of plans. Because see, the central government, to its credit, has been giving a lot of money for judicial infrastructure. We've like the centrally sponsored scheme for judicial infrastructure has given 10,000 crores just from the central government side, which is supposed to be used for district court residences and courtrooms. The problem is there's very little visibility on how this money is being used exactly. And having standards, like Justice Patel said, is a great way to start. Once you have standards, then you can easily tick mark and see how, like where's the lacuna, where the money has to go.
Standards, Prashant, can't be set by the registrars. And I'll give you a straightforward example because the Bombay High Court, as you know, is supposed to have a new High Court complex at the Bandra Kurla complex. So one of the last things that happened before I left is I got this wish list, which is the area distribution. And I found there were a staggering number of flats, residential flats, for registrars of 2,500 square feet each. What's the size of your flat? Where you're sitting in this house?
Me, I think it's 1,500.
Oh, there you go. And all the secretaries were supposed to get 1,500 square foot flats. The stenos. This is how you want to use space. This is your idea of standardization. Can't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Great
mean, that's
beginning.
it.
I mean, lots of interesting questions. But
yeah, and I know we're well over time, so I wanna thank Prashant and Chitrakshi for like provoking a discussion like this through your book, because I think it's brought in front of all our minds issues that we weren't thinking about, and I just hope it acts as and I think a lot of us are interested in unpacking this more. And like Justice Gautam Patel said, if we start asking the right questions now, even use that as a good starting point, and for more of us to unpack what we are seeing in the problem, what are the different ways we can look at it, I think that would be a good starting point for us to move. And I hopefully start with some low-hanging fruits that we can take this forward with. But I think all of
Thank you so much for organizing this for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
sorry.
Think of a title for volume 2. The sequel.
I think there were many chapters that you laid out today itself.
No, volume 2. Come on, now let's do it.
I would love volume 2 to be written by a High Court judge. you people have so much to tell.
Happy to volunteer.
Yeah, I think
Please
you'll
do,
find a
Justice
wall.
Patel. I know there's an author hidden
Yes, sir.
inside you.
We're happy to volunteer.
That'd be fantastic. Okay, this is great. Thank you all. Please,
Supriya, I have a title suggestion. I can't end without that.
please go ahead.
Burn it down and start again.
That's a contempt application waiting to be filed.
It works.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? I mean, we should have all the radical options in front of us, and burning and starting again is one of those. But thank you so much, all. This has been such a fun evening. Please feel free to reach out to me. We'll share Prashant and Chitrakshi. If people want to reach out to you, it's okay if we share your contacts.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
definitely.
sure, that makes sense.
We'll find a way to
Thank
do
you
that.
so much for
post.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Justice Sridhar. Thank you, Justice Patel. Thanks, Supriya.
Thanks.
bye.
Thanks, Supriya.